The wind carried more than dust across the barren plains of Cedar Ridge. It carried whispers, prayers, and the weight of unspoken sorrows. The small town sat like a weathered bone between the vast desert and the jagged mountains, its wooden buildings bleached pale by the relentless sun. Here, where the railroad had promised prosperity but delivered only false hope, survival meant more than drawing breath. It meant keeping your place in the rigid order of things. Martha Whitfield stood at the window of her small wooden house, watching the dust devils dance across the empty street. The house, built alongside the abandoned church, had been her prison and sanctuary for 3 years now. 3 years since the cholera took Samuel, leaving her with nothing but his surname and the crushing weight of being the preacher's widow. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, feeling the grit that somehow found its way inside no matter how tightly she sealed the windows. At 32, she was neither old nor young, caught in that peculiar purgatory reserved for women who had lost their purpose along with their husbands. Her reflection stared back, pale skin drawn tight over high cheekbones, dark hair pulled severely back, gray eyes that had forgotten how to shine. The town bell rang 4 times, its bronze voice cracked and mournful. Time for the women to gather at the general store, to exchange recipes and gossip while pretending not to notice how their eyes lingered on her modest black dress. Counting the days she'd worn mourning clothes past what was considered proper. 3 years was too long. Their looks said, either remarry or resign yourself to spinsterhood. But stop haunting us with your grief. Martha turned from the window and surveyed her domain. The kitchen table, scarred from years of use, held her Bible and a half-eaten biscuit from breakfast. The rocking chair by the fireplace sat motionless, its runners worn smooth by Samuel's nightly devotions. Everything remained exactly as he'd left it, as if maintaining the order might somehow summon him back from the red clay grave behind the church. She had loved Samuel, or at least she'd convinced herself she had. He was a good man, gentle in his way, though his passion had been reserved for his sermons rather than his marriage bed. Their union had been one of propriety and mutual respect, the kind encouraged by her parents when she'd reached 20 without a suitor. Martha, her mother had said, a preacher is a respectable match. You'll want for nothing and have the admiration of the community. The admiration had turned to pity, then to something sharper, expectation. The preacher's widow must be above reproach, a living monument to Christian virtue. She must not laugh too loud, must not wear colors, must not show any sign that beneath the black bombazine beat a heart that still remembered what it meant to want. Want! The word tasted foreign on her tongue. What did she want? The question came to her in the deep of night when the coyotes howled and the walls seemed to close in. She wanted to tear off the mourning dress and run barefoot through the desert. She wanted to taste whiskey instead of weak tea. She wanted to feel hands on her skin that weren't checking for fever or offering condolences. Such thoughts were sin, and she buried them deep, the way the town buried its dead, quickly and without ceremony in the hard earth. A movement outside caught her eye. A rider approached from the east, where the trail wound through Devil's Canyon. Not unusual. Drifters passed through Cedar Ridge regular enough, seeking water and supplies before pushing on to California or back to Texas. But something in the way this one sat his horse, loose and easy despite the animal's obvious exhaustion, made her linger at the window. The horse was a paint, its coat dulled by trail dust. The rider himself was obscured by the wide brim of his hat and the bandana pulled up against the dust. His clothes spoke of hard travel, leather chaps worn smooth, a coat that had seen better decades, boots run down at the heel. A rifle rested in a scabbard by his knee, and she could make out the handle of a revolver at his hip. He stopped at the water trough outside Morrison's store, dismounting with the careful movements of a man who'd spent too many hours in the saddle. When he pulled down the bandana to splash water on his face, Martha caught a glimpse of dark stubble and sun-weathered skin. Not young, but not yet old, somewhere in that dangerous middle ground where men either settled down or became permanently rootless. Mrs. Morrison appeared in the doorway of the store, her thin lips pursed in disapproval. Martha couldn't hear the words exchanged, but she recognized the sharp gesture of dismissal. "No work here. Stranger, no welcome either. Move along." The man touched the brim of his hat, a mockery of courtesy, and led his horse to the saloon. Even from across the street, Martha could see the resignation in the set of his shoulders. Cedar Ridge didn't take kindly to drifters, especially not ones who looked like they'd been running from something, or toward something. Sometimes there wasn't much difference. She should have turned away then, gone about the business of mending the altar cloth or preparing her meager supper. Should have, but didn't. Instead, she watched as he emerged from the saloon minutes later, apparently denied service there as well, the good Christians of Cedar Ridge protecting their own. The late afternoon sun slanted across the street, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. The stranger stood beside his horse, one hand on the animal's neck, seeming to consider his options. There weren't many. The next town was 2 days' ride through hostile territory. His horse needed rest, and from the way he swayed slightly, so did he. Martha's hands moved before her mind could stop them, smoothing her hair, adjusting her collar. Foolishness. What did it matter how she looked? But something in the way he stood there, accepting the town's rejection without anger or plea, stirred something she'd thought long buried. She opened her door before courage could desert her. The stranger's head turned at the sound, and for a moment their eyes met across the dusty expanse. His were dark, almost black, with lines at the corners that spoke of squinting into too many suns. There was no surprise in them at seeing her, as if he'd expected nothing less than to find judgment waiting behind every door in Cedar Ridge. "There's a well behind the church," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, too loud in the quiet street. "For your horse." He studied her for a long moment, taking in the widow's weeds, the modest house, the pale face that hadn't seen enough sun. Then he touched his hat brim again, this time without mockery. "Obliged, ma'am." As he led his horse around the side of the abandoned church, Martha retreated inside, her heart beating like a wild thing. What had she done? Offering water was simple Christian charity. Nothing more. Samuel would have done the same, wouldn't he? But Samuel had never made her pulse race with just a look. She busied herself in the kitchen, setting the kettle on the stove, slicing the last of yesterday's bread. Through the window, she could see the stranger letting his horse drink, his movements careful and practiced. He'd removed his hat, revealing dark hair shot through with early silver. When he worked the pump to fill his own canteen, she noticed the way his shoulders moved beneath the worn coat, the easy strength in his hands. "Stop it," she told herself. "You're a respectable woman, a widow. This is beneath you." But the loneliness, the loneliness was not beneath her. It was in her, through her, wrapped around her bones like wire. 3 years of sleeping alone, of talking to no one but shopkeepers and church ladies who looked at her like she might be contagious. 3 years of being a symbol instead of a woman. The kettle whistled, sharp and insistent. Martha made a decision that would have horrified her even an hour ago. She filled a bowl with the leftover stew from lunch, placed it on a tray with the bread and a cup of strong coffee. Her hands shook as she carried it outside, but her steps were steady. The stranger had settled himself on the church steps, his horse ground-tied nearby. He looked up as she approached, wariness flickering across his features. She set the tray beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance. "You look like you could use a meal." "Can't pay." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. "Didn't ask for payment." They regarded each other in the fading light. Up close, she could see the dust in the creases of his skin, the weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. There was something else, too, a guardedness that spoke of secrets better left buried. "This your church?" He gestured to the abandoned building. My husband was the preacher. He died 3 years ago." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of a fellow traveler in grief's territory. "Sorry for your loss." Martha almost laughed at the automatic response. How many times had she heard those words? They meant nothing and everything, a social nicety that covered the vast gulf between the living and the bereaved. Don't be. You didn't know him. The stranger raised an eyebrow at her sharp tone but said nothing. Turning his attention to the food, he ate like a man who'd missed too many meals, but with a surprising delicacy, as if remembering manners from some distant past. Martha knew she should leave. Every moment she stood there increased the risk of being seen, of setting tongues wagging. But something held her in place. Curiosity, perhaps, or the simple pleasure of watching someone enjoy food she'd prepared. Name's Jake Cooper, he said finally, setting the empty bowl aside. In case you were wondering, she hadn't been, or hadn't let herself wonder. Names made people real, and real was dangerous. Martha Whitfield. Well, Mrs. Whitfield, I thank you for the kindness. Been a while since anyone showed me any. The words were simple, but something in the way he said them made her throat tight. When was the last time anyone had thanked her for anything beyond the expected duties of a preacher's widow? Where are you headed? Mr. Cooper? He shrugged, a gesture that encompassed all directions and none. Wherever the trail leads, away from where I've been, toward whatever's next. A drifter's answer, revealing nothing. Martha recognized the deflection. She'd become expert at it herself, turning aside questions about her plans, her feelings, her future with vague pieties and scripture quotes. The sun touched the horizon, painting the mountains blood red. Soon the good people of Cedar Ridge would be closing their shutters, lighting their lamps, gathering their families close. And she would return to her empty house, to another night of silence broken only by the settling of old wood and the whisper of turning pages. There's a lean-to behind the stable, she said quickly, before sense could reassert itself. McAllister left town last month. Won't be back. It's not much, but it's dry and out of the wind. Jake Cooper studied her with those dark eyes. Seeing too much. That's twice now you've helped me. People will talk. Let them. The words came out fiercer than intended. They talk anyway. A ghost of a smile touched his weathered features. Suppose they do. Still, I'd hate to cause trouble for you. I'm a grown woman, Mr. Cooper. I can handle trouble. Even as she said it, Martha wondered if it was true. She'd handled grief, loneliness, the suffocating weight of others' expectations. But the kind of trouble that stood before her now, trail-worn and dangerous and utterly alive, that was something else entirely. Jake stood, settling his hat back on his head. The movement brought him closer, and she caught the scent of leather and horse and something indefinable, the smell of distance, of places she'd never see. I'll be moving on come morning, he said. Won't trouble you further. Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. As he gathered his gear and led his horse toward the promised shelter, she turned back to her house. At the door, she paused, looking back. He'd stopped too, silhouetted against the dying light. For a moment, they stood suspended in that desert twilight, two souls recognizing something kindred in each other, a loneliness that went deeper than solitude, a hunger for something more than survival. Then the moment broke. Jake touched his hat and disappeared around the corner. Martha entered her house and closed the door, leaning against it as if to barricade herself against her own reckless impulses. Outside, the first coyote began its evening song, and the wind picked up, rattling the windows like skeleton fingers. In the morning, he would be gone, and she would return to her careful routine, her monument existence. But tonight she would lie awake knowing there was someone else out there in the darkness, someone who looked at her and saw not the preacher's widow, but a woman. It was terrifying. It was thrilling. It was the beginning of everything. Dawn came reluctantly to Cedar Ridge, painting the sky in shades of pearl and ash. Martha had been awake since the rooster's first crow, moving through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Water heated for washing, hair braided and pinned severely, black dress buttoned to the throat, the same rituals that had anchored her for 3 years. Yet this morning, they felt like armor donned for battle. Through the kitchen window, She caught a glimpse of movement near the stable. Jake Cooper was already up, tending to his horse with the careful attention of a man who knew his life might depend on the animal's strength. She watched him work, noting the economy of his movements, the way he spoke low to the paint as he checked its hooves. The sight shouldn't have held her attention, but it did. When was the last time she'd observed someone without being observed in return? In Cedar Ridge, watching meant being watched, every glance catalogued and judged. A sharp knock at her door made her start. Elmira Morrison stood on the porch, thin lips pursed in disapproval. Gray hair scraped back so tightly it pulled at her temples. Martha. The single word carried volumes of reproach. "Good morning, Elmira." Martha kept her voice neutral, though her pulse quickened. News traveled fast in Cedar Ridge, faster when it concerned propriety. "Is it a good morning?" Elmira's watery blue eyes narrowed. "Henry saw you yesterday, speaking to that drifter. I offered him water for his horse, Christian charity, nothing more." Christian charity. Elmira repeated the words like they tasted sour. "That's what you call it, feeding vagrants? And where did he sleep, might I ask?" Heat rose in Martha's cheeks, but she kept her expression calm. "How would I know where he slept? I assume he moved on, as travelers do." The lie came easier than expected. Elmira studied her for a long moment, searching for cracks in the facade. "You should be more careful, Martha. Your position in this community hangs by a thread as it is. 3 years is a long time to mourn. People are beginning to wonder if you intend to remarry, or if you're content to live off the church's charity forever." "I work for what little I receive," Martha said quietly. "Mending, sewing, tending the graves." Yes. Elmira waved a dismissive hand. "But it's not natural. A woman alone. It invites speculation, temptation. That man, for instance. Did you see the guns he carried? The look in his eye? Trouble follows men like that." Martha thought of Jake's dark eyes, the weariness in them, the surprising gentleness with which he'd handled his exhausted horse. "All I saw was a tired traveler in need of kindness." Kindness. Another sour repetition. "Well, don't let your kindness become the town's burden. We've worked hard to make Cedar Ridge respectable. We don't need drifters and their problems bringing violence to our streets." After Elmira left, Martha stood in her doorway, watching the woman's rigid back as she marched toward the general store. No doubt the story would be embellished with each telling. By noon, the whole town would know the preacher's widow had been consorting with dangerous strangers. "Let them talk," she'd said last night. Brave words in the darkness, but in the harsh morning light, with Elmira's warnings ringing in her ears. Martha felt the familiar weight of fear settling on her shoulders. She was heading back inside when she saw him. Jake stood by the well, hat in hand, watching her house with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met across the dusty yard, and Martha felt that same jolt of recognition, as if they were the only two people in the world who understood some fundamental truth. He approached slowly, giving her time to retreat. She didn't. "Morning, Mrs. Whitfield." His voice was rough with sleep or disuse. "Mr. Cooper, I trust you rested well." A wry smile tugged at his mouth. "Better than I have in weeks. I'm obliged to you." "You said you'd be moving on." "I did. I am." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Thought I might ask around town first, see if anyone needs an extra hand. My horse could use another day's rest, and I could use the work." Martha glanced toward the store where Elmira had disappeared. "You won't find much welcome here. I'm afraid Cedar Ridge doesn't trust outsiders. Notice that?" He followed her gaze. "Friend of yours?" "Elmira Morrison. She runs the general store with her husband. And the town's moral standards, apparently." The words came out sharper than intended. Jake's eyebrow rose slightly, but he didn't comment on her tone. "Well, I've dealt with worse than suspicious shopkeepers." "Might try the ranches outside town. Heard the Barton spread might be hiring." Martha shook her head. "Tom Barton won't hire anyone without a recommendation from the town council. Neither will the others. They've had trouble with drifters before, cattle thieves, claim jumpers. Now they're careful. And yet you weren't. The statement hung between them. Not quite a question. Martha felt heat rise in her face again. I offered water and food, nothing more. No, ma'am. You offered trust. That's worth more than gold out here. Before she could respond, the church bell rang. Not the regular hourly chime, but the rapid clanging that meant trouble. Martha's head snapped up. Jake's hand moved instinctively to his gun before he caught himself. People emerged from buildings, heading toward the sound. Martha saw rancher John Whelan riding hard down Main Street, his horse lathered with sweat. Indians, Whelan shouted. Apache raiders hit the Colson place, burned the barn, took horses. Fear rippled through the gathering crowd. The Apache had been quiet for months, but everyone knew the peace was fragile. Martha noticed how quickly the townsmen checked their weapons, how the women gathered their children close. How many? Mayor Garrett pushed through the crowd, still buttoning his vest. Don't know. Colson's boy made it here, but he's half out of his mind. Says at least a dozen. We need to form a posse, someone shouted. Track them before they hit another ranch. Martha watched Jake during the commotion. He stood apart, alert but uninvolved, like a man accustomed to trouble that wasn't his. But she saw the way his eyes tracked the speakers, the subtle shift of his weight that spoke of readiness. You there? Mayor Garrett had noticed him. Stranger, you know anything about Indian fighting? Jake met the mayor's suspicious glare calmly. Some isn't good enough. This is town business. We don't need outsiders. I tracked Apache for the army. Jake interrupted quietly. 5th Cavalry, under Major Bennett. Spent 3 years in the territories. The crowd's murmur changed tone. Military experience carried weight, even from a drifter. Whelan pushed forward. Can you track in this terrain? These aren't reservation Indians, they're Broncos. Know every canyon and waterhole. I can track. Martha saw the calculation in the men's faces. They needed every gun, every skilled tracker. Their distrust warred with necessity. We don't know you, Garrett said finally. How do we know you won't lead us into an ambush? Or disappear with our horses in the night? You don't. Jake's tone was matter of fact. But you need me more than I need you. I was leaving anyway. Makes no difference to me if your ranches burn. Now see here, Garrett started, but Whelan cut him off. He's right. We can't track Apache with shopkeepers and clerks. He turned to Jake. You help us. We'll pay fair wages. $30 and found. 40. And my horse gets grain, not just grass. Done. The bargain struck. The men dispersed to gather weapons and supplies. Martha found herself standing alone with Jake as the crowd melted away. Already she could see the shift in how people looked at him, still suspicious. But now, with a grudging respect. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. It's not your fight. He settled his hat, the gesture hiding his eyes. Been running from fights for a while now. Maybe it's time I stopped. Or maybe you're just trading one kind of trouble for another. That earned her a real smile, transforming his weathered features. Spoken like a woman who knows about trouble. I know about choices, and their consequences. Then you know sometimes there aren't any good ones, just different kinds of survival. He touched his hat brim in that gesture she was beginning to recognize, courtesy mixed with distance, and headed for the stable. Martha watched him go, aware of eyes on her from windows and doorways. The preacher's widow, talking too long with a hired gun. By evening, the story would have grown beyond recognition. In the general store, she endured Elmira's knowing looks and pointed silence. Other women whispered behind their hands, glancing at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Martha kept her expression serene, selecting her few purchases with careful deliberation. Heard that drifter signed on with the posse. Mrs., Garrett said, her tone deceptively casual. Convenient, him being here just when we needed a tracker. The Lord provides, Martha replied evenly. Does he? Some might say it's suspicious. Indians attacking right when a stranger shows up. Almost like someone told them our men would be at the cattle auction in Tucson. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Martha met Mrs. Garrett's gaze steadily. "Are you suggesting Mr. Cooper is in league with Apache raiders? That seems unlikely for a former cavalry soldier." "If he is former cavalry, anyone can make claims." "Just as anyone can make accusations," Martha said quietly. "I believe that's what the Bible calls bearing false witness." Color flooded Mrs. Garrett's face. "How dare you quote scripture at me, you who've forgotten what it means to be a proper widow?" "Ladies." Reverend Mills, the circuit preacher who visited monthly, entered the store. His mild voice cut through the tension. "Surely this is not the time for discord. We must pray for the success of our men and the safety of our community." The women subsided into sullen silence. Martha gathered her purchases and left, feeling their stares burning into her back. Outside, she nearly collided with young Tom Colson, his face still pale with shock. "Mrs. Whitfield!" He caught her arm, his grip desperate. "They killed Pa. Shot him when he tried to stop them taking the horses. Ma's hurt bad. They need the doc. But he went with the posse." "Where's your mother now, Tom?" "At home, Mrs. Barton's with her. But there's so much blood." Martha didn't hesitate. "I'll come. I've tended wounded before." She'd learned rough medicine during the cholera outbreak, skills born of necessity when the doctor was overwhelmed. As she hurried to gather supplies, she passed the assembled posse. Jake sat his horse among them, checking a rifle with practiced ease. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw something flicker in his concern, warning. Then the moment passed. The men rode out in a cloud of dust, leaving the town to wait and worry. Martha climbed into Tom's wagon, her medical bag clutched tight, and let him drive her toward whatever horror waited at the Colson Ranch. The sun climbed higher, a merciless eye watching the drama unfold below. In its harsh light, everything stood revealed: the fear beneath the town's rigid propriety, the violence lurking at civilization's edges, the dangerous currents that ran between a grieving widow and a mysterious stranger. Change had come to Cedar Ridge on a painted horse, carrying secrets and possibilities in equal measure. Martha had opened the door to it, and now there was no turning back. The wheel rut stretched before them, leading into uncertainty. Behind them, the tongues of Cedar Ridge wagged furiously, weaving a net of speculation and judgment around the preacher's widow who had forgotten her place. But Martha didn't look back. For the first time in 3 years, she was moving toward something instead of standing still. Even if that something might destroy her carefully constructed world, it was better than the slow suffocation of safety. The wagon jolted over rough ground, and Tom cursed softly, apologetically. Martha gripped the seat and said nothing, her thoughts already on the blood and suffering ahead. In town, they condemned her for showing kindness to a stranger. Soon enough, she thought grimly, they'd have real reasons for their whispers. The posse returned 3 days later, dusty and diminished. Martha watched from the Colson Ranch where she'd been tending to Mary Colson's wounds. 2 riderless horses told their own grim story. Jake Cooper rode among the survivors, his face masked with trail dust, but she could see the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. The town gathered as the men dismounted. Mayor Garrett, his arm in a makeshift sling, addressed the crowd. "We tracked them to Devil's Canyon, lost Henderson and young Davies in an ambush." He paused, swallowing hard. "But we recovered most of the horses and dealt with the raiders." Martha noticed how his eyes slid away from the women in the crowd. Dealt with meant things better left unspoken, the kind of frontier justice that everyone accepted but no one wanted to examine too closely. "Cooper here," Whelan spoke up. "He read the trail like scripture. Without him, we'd have ridden straight into their main camp. Man saved lives." A murmur ran through the crowd. Not quite acceptance, but a shift in the current. Jake dismounted slowly, favoring his left side. Martha saw the dark stain on his shirt and started forward before catching herself. Too many eyes watching, too many tongues ready to wag. But Reverend Mills had no such constraints. "You're hurt, son. Let's get you to the doc. Just a graze," Jake said, but he swayed slightly on his feet. "The doctor's still at the Colson place," Martha heard herself say. Bring him there. She turned before anyone could comment, climbing back onto the wagon. After a moment's hesitation, Reverend Mills helped Jake up beside her. The crowd parted, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. The ride was silent except for the creak of wheels and Jake's carefully controlled breathing. Martha kept her eyes on the road, acutely aware of his presence beside her, the heat of him despite the evening's chill. "You stayed to help the Coulsons," he said finally. "Someone had to. Mary needed tending, and the town, they couldn't have been pleased." Martha's hands tightened on the reins. "The town's opinions seem less important when you're trying to keep someone from bleeding to death. Sounds like you've been learning dangerous lessons. Mrs. Whitfield." She glanced at him, saw the ghost of a smile despite his pain. "Perhaps I've had a dangerous teacher." At the ranch, Dr. Holcomb cleaned and stitched Jake's wound, a deep graze along his ribs where an Apache bullet had carved a furrow. Martha busied herself with Mary Coulson, but she could hear the men talking in low voices. "You were lucky," Holcomb said. "Inch to the right and we'd be digging another grave." "Wasn't luck," Jake replied. "Apache boy. Couldn't have been more than 15. Had me dead to rights but hesitated. Just a second. But enough. And silence. Then, and I didn't hesitate." Martha closed her eyes, seeing a boy not much older than Tom Coulson, fighting for his people's survival, the mathematics of frontier life, them or us, kill or be killed. She understood it, had lived it during the cholera outbreak when they'd had to turn away sick drifters to protect the town. But understanding didn't make it easier to swallow. That night, with Jake resting in the Coulsons' barn and Mary finally sleeping peacefully, Martha sat on the porch with Tom. The boy had aged years in days, his father's death carving hard lines around his young mouth. "Ma says we should sell out," he said quietly. "Move to California where it's safer. What do you think?" "I think Pa would want us to stay." "This is our land. He fought for it, died for it." His voice cracked. "But I'm scared. Mrs. Whitfield, what if they come back?" Martha had no easy answers. The frontier demanded courage, but it also took its payment in blood and sorrow. She thought of her own careful existence in town, the safety of routine and propriety. Was that living or just another kind of dying? Fear's natural. "Tom, it keeps us careful, but we can't let it make our choices for us." The boy nodded, looking older than his 16 years. After he went inside, Martha remained on the porch, watching stars emerge in the vast sky. She heard footsteps and wasn't surprised when Jake emerged from the shadows, moving stiffly. "You should be resting," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Too quiet after 3 days of riding." He lowered himself carefully onto the step below her, maintaining proper distance even as his presence seemed to fill the space around her. "The boy's struggling," he observed. "He has reason to. He lost his father and gained responsibilities he's not ready for. Nobody's ever ready. We just learn as we go. Hope we don't make too many mistakes along the way." "Is that what you did? Learned as you went?" Jake was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I made my share of mistakes. Some you learn from, some you carry forever." "Like that Apache boy." His head turned sharply. "You heard. Sound carries. I'm sorry." "For what? That I'm alive and he's not? For the choice you had to make, for the weight you'll carry." Jake studied her in the moonlight. "You understand about weight." It wasn't a question. Martha thought of Samuel, of the night he died, his fever-bright eyes, his desperate prayers, the way he'd gripped her hand and begged her to be strong for the town, the weight of being what everyone expected, needed, demanded. "Yes," she said simply. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the desert surrounding them, coyotes calling, wind through sage, the distant hoot of an owl. Martha felt something easing in her chest, a loosening of bonds she'd worn so long she'd forgotten they were there. "You can't go back to town tonight," Jake said eventually. "Too dangerous alone on the road." "I know. Tom's already made up a bed for me inside. And tomorrow, Tomorrow she'd return to Cedar Ridge, to the whispers and stares and careful boundaries. But tonight, sitting here with this dangerous stranger who understood about carrying weight, she felt more herself than she had in years. "Tomorrow will take care of itself," she said. Jake nodded slowly. "Mills says there's talk in town about you helping me, staying out here, people building stories out of nothing. Let them build. They've been constructing my life for 3 years. At least now their stories are more interesting than poor Martha, wasting away in her widow's weeds." A surprised laugh escaped him, quickly stifled as he pressed a hand to his wounded side. "Careful, Mrs. Whitfield. That sounds dangerously like rebellion." "Perhaps it is." The words tasted like freedom. "I've been the perfect widow, the grieving saint, the moral example. And what has it gotten me? An empty house and empty days and the privilege of being judged for showing basic human kindness." "Kindness to the wrong sort," Jake reminded her. "And what sort is that, exactly? You fought for the town, risked your life for people who'd cross the street to avoid you. That doesn't make me a good man, just a useful one." Martha looked at him, really looked, saw the scars that spoke of old violence, the weathered lines that mapped hard choices, the guarded eyes that had seen too much, but also the gentleness with horses, the respect in how he kept his distance, the pain he carried for a boy who'd tried to kill him. Good, bad, those are simple words for complicated truths. I've known supposedly good men who were cruel in small ways, and bad men who showed surprising grace. "Which was your husband?" The question cut deep, but cleanly. Martha considered her answer. "Samuel was good, genuinely good. But his goodness was like winter sunlight, bright but without warmth. He loved God, loved his calling, loved the idea of saving souls, but loving a person, a woman, with all her flaws and needs." She shrugged. "That was harder for him. Must have been lonely." "Yes." The simple acknowledgement felt like lifting a stone from her chest. "It is, but admitting that feels like betraying his memory." "The dead don't own us," Jake said quietly. "They had their time. This is ours." Easy words for a man with no ties. "You think I have no dead, no ghosts riding with me?" His voice roughened. "There's a woman buried in Amarillo, my wife. Fever took her while I was gone, chasing outlaws for bounty money. Came home to a grave and neighbors who said she called for me at the end." Martha's heart constricted. "Jake, 5 years ago. I've been drifting since, telling myself it was freedom. But maybe it was just another kind of prison, one I built myself." They sat with their shared griefs, two people marked by loss but not defined by it. The moon climbed higher, washing the desert in silver. Somewhere in the distance, a screech owl called, its cry like a lost soul. "Why are you telling me this?" Martha asked finally. "Because you fed a stranger. Because you see me as a man, not just a hired gun. Because—" He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "Because when I look at you, I see someone else who knows what it means to be alone in a crowd." The air between them charged with possibility and danger. Martha felt drawn to him like a moth to flame, knowing the risk but unable to resist the warmth. "I should go in," she said, not moving. "Yes, this is unwise." "Yes." Still neither moved. The space between them hummed with unspoken words, with wants too dangerous to acknowledge. Martha thought of all the warnings, from Elmira, from the proper voices in her own head, from a lifetime of being told what women should and shouldn't do. "I won't be another weight for you to carry," Jake said suddenly. "I'll be moving on once I heal. This was always temporary." "I know." And she did know, but the knowing didn't stop the ache. Perhaps that's what makes it bearable. No promises, no expectations, just two people who understand each other for a brief moment. Is that enough? Martha thought of her empty house, her empty bed, the empty years stretching ahead. Then she looked at this scarred drifter who'd appeared like an answer to prayers she hadn't dared pray. "It's more than I've had in 3 years," she said softly. Maybe that makes me weak or foolish or fallen. But I'm tired of being strong and wise and pure. I'm tired of being a symbol instead of a woman." Jake stood carefully, favoring his wounded side. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might cross the careful distance between them. But he only looked down at her with those dark eyes that had seen too much and asked for nothing. "You're the strongest woman I've met. Martha Whitfield. Don't let anyone tell you different." He walked back to the barn, his shadow long in the moonlight. Martha sat alone on the porch, her heart racing, her skin alive with possibility. Tomorrow would bring consequences, judgment, the weight of choices made. But tonight, she'd spoken truths that had festered in silence. Tonight, she'd been seen, not as the preacher's widow, but as Martha, just Martha, with all her hungers and sorrows and stubborn hopes. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles, but Martha felt their light like a blessing, a reminder that even in darkness, there was beauty to be found, even in sorrow. Moments of grace. She rose and went inside, to her narrow bed and her uncertain future. But for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel like she was walking toward her own grave. She felt like she was walking toward life, dangerous and wild, and absolutely worth the risk. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard as Martha worked on mending the fence that separated the church property from the open desert. Jake had insisted on helping despite his healing wound, and they'd fallen into an easy rhythm, him holding the posts steady while she secured the wire. It had been 2 weeks since the Apache raid. 2 weeks of stolen moments and careful distances. Jake had taken a room at the boarding house, paying his rent with odd jobs around town. The initial suspicion had faded to wary acceptance, though Martha still felt eyes on them whenever they spoke in public. "You're getting calluses," Jake observed, taking her hand to examine her palm. The touch was innocent, practical, just checking for blisters that might need tending. But Martha felt it like lightning, swift and dangerous. She pulled back, glancing toward town. "Soft hands are for ladies with servants," she said, trying for lightness. "I haven't been that kind of lady for years. You're still a lady, just a different kind." The way he said it, with quiet conviction, made her throat tight. She bent to retrieve the hammer, needing distance from the warmth in his eyes. They worked in companionable silence until the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both look up. 3 riders appeared on the town road. Strangers, hard-faced men with the look of trouble about them. Jake's entire demeanor changed. His hand didn't move to his gun, but Martha saw the subtle shift in stance, the way his eyes tracked the rider's approach. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Jake." "Now, Martha." The use of her given name, the urgency in his voice, sent her moving toward the house, but she stopped at the doorway, watching as the riders drew up near Jake. Well, the lead rider said, a lean man with pale eyes and a scar that pulled his mouth into a permanent sneer. "Jake Cooper. Been a while?" "Harlan." Jake's voice was flat, giving nothing away. "You're a long way from Texas. Could say the same about you. Heard you were up this way. Thought we'd stop by, for old time's sake." The other 2 riders spread out slightly, a casual movement that Martha recognized as tactical. Her hand found the shotgun just inside the door. Samuel's old bird gun that she'd cleaned but never fired. "Old times are dead and buried," Jake said. "Like they should be." Harlan's laugh was ugly. "That's no way to greet former partners. We rode together for 2 years, Cooper, shared profits, shared risks. Shared a rope if we'd been caught. I'm done with that life. Harlan." "Are you? Living respectable now?" Harlan's pale eyes found Martha in the doorway. "Got yourself a woman. Looks like pretty little widow, from what we hear in town. The preacher's wife. Leave her out of this." "Oh, but that's not how it works. See, we've got a proposition. Job down in Mexico, big haul. Need a 4th man, someone who knows the territory. Thought of our old friend Jake. Not interested. You sure? Because from where I sit, you've got a nice setup here. Be a shame if something happened to it." If certain stories got told about your past, don't imagine these good Christian folks would take kindly to knowing they've been harboring a... Jake moved so fast Martha barely saw it. One moment he was standing relaxed. The next, Harlan was looking down the barrel of Jake's Colt. "I said I'm done. You deaf or just stupid?" The other riders tensed, hands hovering near weapons. Martha raised the shotgun, stepping into view. The click of hammers being cocked was loud in the stillness. "Afternoon, gentlemen," she said pleasantly. "I believe Mr. Cooper asked you to leave." Harlan's eyes widened slightly. "Well now, the widow's got teeth. This is private property," Martha continued, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You're trespassing. In Cedar Ridge. We defend what's ours." A tense moment stretched between them. Then Harlan laughed, raising his hands in mock surrender. "No need for unpleasantness. We'll go. But Jake, you think about our offer. We'll be at the Silver Dollar in Tucson for 3 days. After that," he shrugged. "After that, we might have to revisit this conversation. Less friendly-like." The three rode off, leaving dust and danger in their wake. Jake holstered his gun, his face carved from stone. "Pack your things," he told Martha. "You can't stay here tonight. I'm not running from... Those men are killers. Martha, whatever respectability I've earned here won't matter if they decide to take what they want." He turned to face her fully, and she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. "Please." "Then come with me. We'll go to the Barlows, or... No, my presence puts you in more danger. I'll handle this." "How? By meeting them in Tucson? By going back to whatever life you shared?" Jake's jaw tightened. "By ending it, one way or another. You mean to face them alone, 3 against 1? Wouldn't be the first time, but maybe the last." They stood facing each other in the golden afternoon light, everything unsaid hanging between them. Martha felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge, safety in one direction, something wild and dangerous in the other. She set down the shotgun and stepped close to him, close enough to see the pulse beating in his throat, the fine lines around his eyes. "I won't be driven from my home by threats," she said softly, "and I won't let you face your past alone. We stand together, or not at all." "Martha, you said the dead don't own us. Well, neither does the past. Whatever you were, whatever you did, the man I know is the one who saved this town, who tends horses like they're children, who treats a lonely widow like she matters." Jake's hand came up slowly, cupping her face with infinite care. "You do matter, more than you know. That's why..." She silenced him the only way she could think of, rising on her toes. She pressed her lips to his, a brief touch that sent fire racing through her veins. He went utterly still. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him as he deepened the kiss. It was nothing like Samuel's dutiful pecks. This was hunger and promise and barely leashed need. Martha felt herself dissolving, every careful boundary she'd maintained crumbling under the onslaught of sensation. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "Martha," he said roughly, "this changes things. Yes, those men are tomorrow's problem. Right now, I want..." She paused, struggling with words for feelings she'd never acknowledged. "I want to feel alive. For whatever time we have, I want to stop being afraid of wanting." Jake studied her face, reading the determination there. "You're sure?" Instead of answering, she took his hand and led him toward the house. At the threshold, she paused, looking back at the empty road, the quiet town, the life she'd lived in careful solitude. Then she stepped inside, pulling him with her into the shadows of the house that had been her prison and might now become her salvation. The door closed behind them, shutting out the world and its judgments. In the golden light filtering through curtains, 2 damaged souls found each other, found comfort and heat and a connection that transcended their fears. Outside, the sun continued its descent, painting the desert in shades of fire. The town of Cedar Ridge went about its evening routines, unaware that in the old church house, a resurrection was taking place. Later, much later, as they lay entwined in the narrow bed that had held only loneliness for so long. Martha traced the scars on Jake's chest, each one a story, a close call, a moment when death had reached for him and missed. "What were you before?" she asked quietly. "With those men?" Jake was silent for a long moment, his hand moving slowly through her unbound hair. "A thief, a gun for hire. Whatever paid and kept me moving." His voice was flat. "Matter of fact, after Sarah died, nothing mattered. I figured if I kept moving fast enough, taking enough risks, eventually I'd catch a bullet and the pain would stop. But you didn't. No, just got harder, meaner, until one day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back." He pulled her closer. "That's when I left, drifted north, trying to find something of who I used to be. And then you rode into Cedar Ridge, and then I met you." His lips brushed her forehead. "A woman who saw past the guns and the reputation to something worth saving." Martha rose up on her elbow, looking down at him in the dim light. "We saved each other. Harlan won't give up. Men like him, they don't forget and they don't forgive. I've brought danger to your door." "My door was already dangerous," Martha said firmly. "Just a different kind. The slow death of respectability, of being buried alive in others' expectations. At least with your danger, I'm choosing my risks." Jake's hand came up to tangle in her hair, pulling her down for a kiss that was tender and fierce at once. "You're a remarkable woman, Martha Whitfield." "Just a woman," she corrected. "Finally, just a woman." As darkness fell over Cedar Ridge, they held each other close, knowing that morning would bring consequences. Harlan and his men wouldn't simply ride away. The town would soon know about this afternoon, about the closed door and what it meant. But for now, in this stolen moment, they had found something worth the price they'd pay. In each other's arms, they discovered that sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the only one that led to life. The candle guttered and went out, leaving them in darkness. But Martha wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, the darkness felt like a friend, hiding them from judgment, wrapping them in possibility. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with its guns and choices and the weight of the past. Tonight, they had each other. Tonight, that was enough. Tonight, the preacher's widow was finally, fully alive. Dawn broke gray and cold, matching the mood that had settled over Cedar Ridge like a shroud. Martha stood at her kitchen window, watching the empty street, knowing that by now the whispers had started. Mrs. Garrett had seen Jake leave her house near midnight. There would be no keeping that quiet. A knock at her door made her stiffen. She expected Elmira, or another of the town's moral guardians, come to deliver judgment. Instead, she found Tom Coulson, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Morning, Mrs. Whitfield. Ma sent me to fetch you. Says she needs your help with something." Martha knew a summons when she heard one. Mary Coulson had become an ally of sorts during her recovery, but even allies had limits. "I'll get my shawl." The Coulson ranch felt different in the morning light. Mary sat on the porch despite the chill, her wounded arm still bound, but her eyes sharp and knowing. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "We need to talk." Martha sat, her back straight, preparing for condemnation. "That man who helped track the Apache," Mary began. "Jake Cooper. He's more than he seems." "Most people are." Mary's laugh was dry. "True enough, but his kind of more comes with blood attached. Those men who visited yesterday. Tom saw them from the field, recognized one from a wanted poster in Tucson." Martha kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Cooper's past is his own business." "Is it? When it rides into our town with guns and threats?" Mary leaned forward, wincing at the movement. "I'm not judging. Martha, Lord knows I've got no stones to throw, but you need to understand what you're risking." "I understand." "Do you? Because from where I sit, you're a woman who's been sleeping for 3 years and just woke up to find a wildfire at your door." Martha met her gaze steadily. "Maybe I'm tired of being safe while I'm slowly dying inside." Mary was quiet for a long moment, studying her. "You love him." It wasn't a question, but Martha answered anyway. "I feel alive when he's near, for the first time since Samuel died, maybe for the first time ever. I feel like myself, instead of someone's idea of who I should be. And when he leaves, because men like that always leave, Martha, by choice or by bullet, they don't stay. Then I'll have had something real, even if it's brief. That's more than most get." Mary sighed, settling back in her chair. "You remind me of myself at your age. So sure that feeling was worth any price." She touched her wounded arm absently. "Sometimes it is. Sometimes it costs more than you can imagine." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what's coming will test you. The town's already talking. Elmira Morrison's calling a meeting of the church board tonight. They mean to cast you out, take away your house, your position." Martha had expected this, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill through her. "Let them. I'll find other work. Another place. And if Cooper stands with you, if those men come back," Mary's eyes were serious, "this could turn ugly fast. Blood in the streets ugly. The town might decide you're both more trouble than you're worth." Before Martha could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both tense, but it was only Jake, riding in with Tom from checking the fence lines. He dismounted carefully, still favoring his healing side, his eyes finding Martha immediately. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said formally, touching his hat, but she saw the concern in his eyes, the questions. "Mr. Cooper, I was just leaving. I'll ride with you back to town, not safe alone on the roads." Mary snorted. "As if riding with you is any safer for her reputation." "Reputation doesn't stop bullets," Jake said quietly. The ride back was tense, both of them aware of unspoken truths hanging between them. Finally, as they neared town, Jake spoke. "They're coming for you. The good women of Cedar Ridge. Saw them gathering at the church. I know. I can leave. Draw Harlan and his boys away. Let things settle." Martha reined in her horse, forcing him to stop and face her. "Is that what you want? To leave?" "What I want doesn't matter. Your safety—" "Stop," she cut him off, her voice sharp. "Stop deciding what's best for me. I've had a lifetime of others making my choices. If you want to go, then go, but don't pretend it's for my benefit." Jake's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what men like Harlan are capable of. What I'm capable of, when pushed. Then tell me. Help me understand instead of protecting me like I'm made of spun glass." He was silent for a long moment, his horse shifting restlessly beneath him. When he spoke, his voice was rough with memory. 3 years ago, Harlan and I robbed a bank in Amarillo. Went smooth until a guard decided to be a hero. Harlan shot him, but the man got off a round, hit a woman crossing the street, young mother with a baby in her arms." Martha's breath caught, but she didn't speak. "She died in the dirt while we rode away with the money. The baby survived, screaming in the blood." Jake's hands tightened on the reins. "That's who I was, who Harlan still is. He'll use you to get to me, hurt you to make a point. That's why you need to stop running." Martha moved her horse closer, close enough to reach out and touch his hand. "You can't outride your past, Jake, but you can choose who you are now. And who's that? The man who risked his life for strangers, who shows gentleness when the world taught him violence, who makes me believe that broken things can be mended instead of discarded." Jake turned his hand palm up, lacing his fingers with hers. "You see too much good in me." "Maybe. Or maybe I see what's actually there instead of just the scars." They rode into town together, hands clasped despite the watching eyes. Let them see, Martha thought. Let them know that the preacher's widow had chosen something beyond their small judgments. At her house, they found a delegation waiting. Elmira Morrison, Mrs. Garrett, Reverend Mills, and several other pillars of the community. Their faces were stone, their purpose clear. "Martha," Reverend Mills stepped forward, his kind face troubled. "We need to speak with you, privately. Whatever you have to say can be said here." Martha replied, not dismounting. Elmira's mouth pursed tighter. "Very well. Your behavior has become a scandal. Entertaining men at all hours, abandoning your duties, bringing shame upon your late husband's memory. My husband is dead, Martha interrupted. His memory doesn't need my protection, but the community does. Mrs. Garrett interjected. We've overlooked much because of your grief, but this liaison with a drifter of questionable character, a man who saved your husband's life when the Apache attacked, Martha reminded her. Or have you forgotten that debt? Gratitude doesn't extend to tolerating immorality. Elmira snapped. You have a choice. Martha, end this association immediately, or forfeit your position and home. The church board has decided. Martha felt Jake tense beside her, saw his hand drift toward his gun. She touched his arm gently, stilling him. Then I choose him, she said simply. I choose life over your living death. I choose feeling over numbness, risk over safety. I choose to be fully human instead of half alive. The delegation erupted in shocked murmurs. Reverend Mills raised a hand for silence. Martha, please, think what you're saying. Without the church's support, you'll have nothing. No home, no income, no place in society. I'll have myself, Martha said. For the first time in my life, I'll have myself. Then you're no longer welcome here, Elmira declared. You have until sunset to remove your belongings. She'll stay with me, Jake said, his voice cutting through their pronouncements. Anyone who wants to dispute that can discuss it with me, personally. The threat was implicit, but unmistakable. Several of the men stepped back, remembering this was the man who'd tracked Apache through hell and come back bloodied but alive. You'd threaten us? Garrett blustered. In our own town. I'm stating facts, Jake replied calmly. Mrs. Whitfield is under my protection. Anyone who tries to harm her or drive her out will answer to me. That's not a threat. Mayor, that's a promise. The delegation retreated, muttering among themselves. Only Reverend Mills lingered, approaching Martha with a genuine concern. My child, I fear for your soul. Then pray for me, Martha said gently. But pray also for understanding. Christ himself kept company with outcasts and sinners. Perhaps there's a lesson there. After they left, Martha slid from her horse on trembling legs. The magnitude of what she'd done crashed over her. She was now truly outside society's protection, dependent on a man who might leave at any moment. Jake's arms came around her, steady and strong. You didn't have to do that. Could have bent to them. Let me go. No, she said against his chest. I couldn't. I've bent so long I forgot what it felt like to stand straight. Whatever comes next, at least I'll face it as myself. He held her tighter, and she felt him press his lips to her hair. Harlan will see this as opportunity. A woman without town protection is easy prey. Then we'll face him together. Martha, she pulled back to look at him. No more arguments. We stand together or not at all. That's my choice, freely made. Now you make yours. Stay and fight beside me, or ride on alone. But choose, Jake. Choose who you want to be. The afternoon sun slanted across his face, highlighting the conflict there. Then something settled in his expression. A decision reached. I choose you, he said simply. God help us both. I choose you. As the sun tracked across the sky toward sunset, they worked together to pack her few belongings. Each item removed was a tie severed, a bridge burned. But Martha felt no regret, only a wild freedom that sang in her blood. The respectable widow was dead. In her place stood a woman who'd chosen love over safety, passion over propriety. The price would be high. She could already feel the town's judgment pressing against the windows like a physical force. But as Jake loaded the last box and offered her his hand up onto the wagon, Martha knew she'd make the same choice again. Some things were worth any price, even if that price was everything she'd once thought mattered. The boarding house room was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the dusty main street. Martha sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her traveling dress, listening to the sounds of the saloon below. This was her world now, no longer the respectable church house. but a room above drinking and gambling and all the sins she'd once preached against. Jake stood by the window, keeping watch. He'd been tense all evening, checking his guns, studying the street. The waiting was wearing on them both. "They'll come tonight," he said finally. "Harlan's not patient. He'll have heard about the church casting you out. Know you're vulnerable." "I'm not vulnerable. I'm with you." He turned from the window, and she saw the weight he carried. "That might make you more of a target, not less. Then tell me what to do. Teach me to defend myself instead of just worrying." Jake studied her for a moment, then pulled the smaller of his 2 revolvers from its holster. "You know how to shoot? Samuel taught me to use a rifle for snakes. Never held a pistol. Time to learn." For the next hour, he taught her how to hold the weapon steady, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. His hands over hers were patient, steady, and she tried to focus on the lesson rather than his nearness. "Don't aim for the head or heart," he instructed. "Too small a target when you're scared. Aim for the center of the body. More forgiving." "Have you killed many men?" The question came out before she could stop it. Jake was quiet for a moment. "Enough. Too many. Each one takes a piece of your soul. Martha, don't be eager for it." "I'm not eager, but I won't stand by helpless either." He set the gun aside and took her face in his hands. "You're the least helpless person I know. You faced down the entire town today. That took more courage than any gunfight." It didn't feel like courage. It felt like finally breathing after holding my breath for years. That's what courage is. Choosing to breathe when it would be easier to suffocate. A sound from the street made him tense. Martha heard it too. Horses. Moving slow and quiet. Jake doused the lamp and moved to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. 3 of them, he whispered. "Harlan and his boys. Stay here." "Jake, I mean it. Martha, this is my fight." "No." She picked up the revolver he'd been teaching her with. "It became our fight the moment I chose you. We face this together or not at all." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he checked his own weapons and headed for the door. "Stay behind me. If shooting starts, get to cover. And Martha, if something happens to me, you run. Promise me." "I promise nothing except to stand with you." They descended the back stairs, avoiding the saloon. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Jake led her along the shadows of buildings, circling to come up behind where Harlan's men had positioned themselves outside the boarding house. "Cooper!" Harlan's voice rang out in the darkness. "We know you're in there. Come on out. Bring the woman. We've got business to discuss." Jake stepped out from the alley, Martha behind him. "I'm here. Harlan, say your piece and move on." Harlan turned, his pale eyes glinting in the moonlight. "There's the man of the hour, and the preacher's widow. My, how the mighty have fallen." "Get to the point," Jake said coldly. "The point is, you owe us. That Amarillo job was supposed to set us up for life, but you ran off with your share of guilt and left us holding empty bags. Now you've got a new life. A woman. Respectability. Seems only fair you share the wealth." "There is no wealth. I'm a hired hand doing odd jobs." "But she had a house. Savings. Probably. The good church folk don't let their widows starve." Harlan's smile was ugly. "Hand it over, and we'll be on our way. Otherwise..." "Otherwise what?" Martha stepped out from behind Jake, surprising them all. "You'll shoot us down in the street. Bring the law down on your heads? You're not that stupid." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Ladies got spirit. I like that. Makes it more fun when they break." Jake's hand moved to his gun. "Touch her and you're dead. All 3 of you." 3 against 1? Those aren't good odds." "Cooper, 3 against 2, Martha corrected, raising the revolver Jake had given her. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. "And we're defending our home. That gives us the advantage." One of Harlan's men laughed. "You going to let your woman fight for you now, Cooper? How far you fallen?" "I let her make her own choices," Jake replied. "Something you boys never understood about women. They're not possessions. They're people. And this one's worth more than all of us combined." "Touching," Harlan drawled. But sentiment won't stop bullets. Last chance. Cooper, the money. Or the shot came from behind them, shattering the night. One of Harlan's men cried out, clutching his shoulder. More shots followed, and Martha saw townspeople emerging from buildings, armed and angry. "That's enough," Mayor Garrett's voice boomed out. He stood with several other men, rifles trained on Harlan's group. "We may have cast misses, Whitfield out, but we're still a law-abiding town. You men are disturbing the peace. Move on, or face the consequences." Harlan looked around, calculating odds. The townspeople might not love Jake or Martha, but they loved their quiet streets even more. "This isn't over, Cooper," he snarled. "You can't hide behind shopkeepers forever." "Not hiding," Jake replied evenly. "Just choosing better company than yours." Harlan and his wounded companion mounted up, the third man covering their retreat. As they rode out, Harlan looked back one more time. "Enjoy her while you can. Cooper, women like that have a way of dying young out here. Be a shame if history repeated itself." The threat hung in the air long after the hoofbeats faded. The townspeople dispersed, avoiding eye contact with Jake and Martha. They'd prevented violence, but that didn't mean acceptance. Back in their room, Martha finally let herself shake. Jake held her, murmuring soothing words against her hair. "He meant your wife," she said finally. "The fever that took her, was it really fever?" Jake was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I've wondered. She was alone when it happened. I was chasing bounties, building our stake. Harlan knew where we lived. Might have, but I'll never know for sure. Another weight to carry." Martha pulled back to look at him. "If they come back, they'll come back. Men like Harlan don't forget grudges. But we'll be ready." He touched her face gently. "You were magnificent tonight. Stood there like an avenging angel with that pistol." "I was terrified. But you didn't run. You stood with me." His voice roughened. "No one's ever done that before. Even Sarah. She loved me. But she feared what I was more. I don't fear you, Jake Cooper. I fear losing you. Fear wasting whatever time we have. But I don't fear you." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, as if trying to pour all his unspoken feelings into the contact. When they parted, both breathing hard, Martha saw her own need reflected in his eyes. "I love you," she said simply. "I know it's too soon, too complicated, too everything, but I love you, and I won't pretend otherwise. Martha, you don't have to say it back. I know you're still carrying ghosts. But I needed you to know, in case—" She stopped, unwilling to voice the possibility. "In case Harlan comes back," Jake finished. "In case one of us doesn't survive what's coming." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I came to Cedar Ridge looking for water and rest. Expected to find nothing but another dusty town full of suspicious faces. Instead, I found you, a woman who looked at me and saw something worth saving." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I love you too. Martha, God help us both, but I do." They held each other in the darkness. Two souls who'd found light in unexpected places. Outside, the town slept fitfully, aware that violence lurked at its edges. But in their small room above the saloon, Martha and Jake created their own world, one where past sins could be forgiven and future hopes might bloom. "What happens now?" Martha asked against his chest. "Now we live, day by day, hour by hour. We work. We build something together. We watch for Harlan's return. And we don't waste a moment of whatever time we're given. That's all. That's everything." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Most people don't get even that much. A chance at happiness, however brief. A love worth fighting for. A choice freely made." Martha thought of her old life. The empty routine, the suffocating respectability, the slow death of the soul. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Someone she'd known once but could barely remember. "I regret nothing," she said fiercely. "Whatever comes, I regret nothing." "Nor do I," Jake replied. "For the first time in 5 years, nor do I." They made love then with a tender desperation, knowing each time might be the last. The narrow bed creaked. The walls were thin. And somewhere below, a drunk sang off-key about lost love. It wasn't romantic by any storybook standard, but it was real. It was theirs. And in a world full of pretense and social facades, that raw honesty felt like the greatest luxury of all. Later, as Jake slept beside her, Martha lay awake listening to his breathing. She thought about Harlan's threat, about the danger that would return. She thought about the town that had rejected her, the life she'd abandoned, the uncertain future that stretched ahead. Fear whispered at the edges of her mind, but she pushed it away. She'd made her choice with eyes wide open. Love or safety, life or mere existence. The decision had been easier than she'd expected. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Harlan would return. The town would continue to judge, and the harsh realities of frontier life would test their bond. But tonight, she had Jake's warmth beside her, his love freely given, and the knowledge that she'd finally chosen to truly live. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The attack came at dawn. 3 days later, Martha woke to the sound of breaking glass and Jake's urgent voice. "Get down!" Gunfire erupted outside, shattering the morning stillness. Jake rolled from the bed, grabbing his rifle as bullets splintered the window frame. Martha huddled behind the overturned mattress he'd positioned as cover, her hands finding the revolver he'd insisted she keep close. "How many?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Can't tell. 4, maybe 5. Jake peered around the window edge, snapping off a shot. "They're smart this time. Spread out, covering all exits." More gunfire from below. The saloon was under attack too. Martha heard screams, the crash of furniture, the thunder of boots on stairs. "They're not just after us," she realized. "They're robbing the whole town, using us as the excuse. Harlan always was clever." Jake fired again, cursing as return fire drove him back. "Martha, you need to—" The door exploded inward. 2 men charged through, guns blazing. Jake met them with deadly precision, his rifle speaking twice. One man fell immediately. The other stumbled, wounded but still dangerous. Martha didn't think. The revolver in her hands came up, aimed center mass as Jake had taught her. She squeezed the trigger. Once, twice. The man spun and collapsed. The silence that followed was deafening. Martha stared at the fallen figure, blood spreading beneath him. Her hands shook now, the gun suddenly heavy. "Martha!" Jake's voice cut through her shock. "You saved my life. Don't think about the rest right now." Shouts from the street refocused them. The townspeople were rallying, returning fire against the raiders, but Martha could hear Harlan's voice rising above the chaos, directing his men with military precision. "The bank!" someone screamed. "They're at the bank!" Jake grabbed ammunition, stuffing cartridges into his pockets. "Stay here. Bar the door behind me." "No!" Martha stood, checking her revolver with hands that had steadied again. "We end this together." He looked like he wanted to argue, but another volley of gunfire decided him. They descended through the saloon, stepping over broken glass and overturned tables. The bartender crouched behind the bar, shotgun ready. "They came in shooting," he gasped. "No warning, just—" "How many hurt?" Jake interrupted. "2 dead that I saw. Doc's hit bad. They're holed up in the bank now." Jake and Martha emerged onto the chaotic street. Bodies lay scattered, both raiders and townspeople. The bank stood at the far end, its windows shattered, gun smoke drifting from within. Mayor Garrett crouched behind a water trough, blood staining his shoulder. "Cooper, thank God. They've got hostages in there. Mrs. Morrison, the bank clerk, maybe others. Where's your sheriff? First one they shot. This is planned. Cooper, they knew exactly when we'd be most vulnerable." Jake studied the situation, his mind clearly working through tactical options. Martha saw him transform from the gentleman she loved to the hardened gunfighter he'd been, necessary now, but chilling to witness. "Martha, get to the church tower," he said quietly. "You can cover the back exit from there. Anyone comes out that's not a hostage. You shoot. Can you do that?" She nodded. understanding the weight of what he asked. "What about you?" "I'm going in." "Jake." "It's me Harlan wants. Trade myself for the hostages. Get the innocents clear, then—" He shrugged. "Then we finish it. That's suicide. That's the job." He pulled her close, kissing her hard. "I love you. Remember that." Before she could protest, he was moving, using cover to approach the bank. Martha forced herself to turn away, to run for the church she'd once called home. The tower stairs were familiar, even after weeks away. She positioned herself at the high window, checking sightlines. Below, Jake stood in the open, hands visible but near his guns. "Harlan, let's talk." Silence. Then Harlan appeared in the bank doorway, using Elmira Morrison as a shield. The older woman looked terrified but unharmed. "Cooper, knew you couldn't resist playing hero. Drop the guns." "Let the woman go first. You're not in a position to negotiate." Harlan pressed his pistol to Elmira's temple. "Guns, now." Jake slowly unbuckled his gun belt, letting it fall. Martha's finger found the trigger of her rifle, but the angle was wrong. Elmira was too close. "Now kick them away," Harlan ordered. Jake complied. Martha saw him palm something as he stepped back. A derringer. Hidden backup. "Not much, but something. You always were soft," Harlan sneered. "First that Mexican woman in Amarillo, now this widow. When will you learn women make you weak?" "When will you learn they make us human?" Jake replied calmly. "Human." Harlan laughed. "Look around you. Cooper, this is what humanity gets you. Blood and death. We're killers. You and me. Born to it. Bred to it. Stop pretending otherwise." "I was not anymore." "No? Then why are bodies stacking up wherever you go? That orphanage in Kansas, the ranch family in Nevada. Those were your jobs, Harlan, your choices. That you participated in, that you profited from." Harlan's voice rose. "You don't get to wash the blood off your hands just because you found religion between a widow's thighs." Martha saw Jake tense at the crude words. Saw Harlan notice it too. The outlaw's smile widened. "Oh, she really has got you wound up, hasn't she? Tell me, Cooper, does she know about all of it? About the children in that orphanage? About how you held the door while we—" "Enough." Jake's voice was deadly quiet. "This is between us. Let Mrs. Morrison go, and we'll settle it. Man to man? How noble." Harlan shoved Elmira forward. She stumbled but ran, Mayor Garrett pulling her to safety. "But you're forgetting something. Cooper, I don't fight fair." 2 more raiders emerged from the bank, guns trained on Jake. Martha's heart sank. Even with her rifle, the angles were impossible. She'd hit Jake if she fired. "See, I've been thinking." Harlan continued conversationally. "Why kill you quick when I can make you suffer first? Your woman's up in that church tower, isn't she? My boys will enjoy her before they kill her. You can listen to her screams while you bleed out. You touch her, and You'll what? You're unarmed, surrounded. Your heroics got you killed. Cooper, but don't worry. I'll comfort your widow personally. Might even keep her alive for a while if she's entertaining enough." Martha saw the moment Jake made his decision. Saw him shift his weight, the hidden derringer sliding into his palm. It wouldn't be enough against 3 armed men, but he'd try. For her, he'd try. She couldn't let him die for her. Not when she could act. Martha stood fully in the window, rifle aimed at Harlan. "Hey, you want me? Come and get me yourself, you coward!" Every head turned toward the church. In that instant of distraction, Jake moved. The derringer barked twice, 1 raider down. Another wounded. Jake dove for his fallen guns as Harlan spun, firing at the tower. Martha ducked as bullets chipped stone around her. Below, gunfire erupted again. She risked a look. Jake had found cover behind a wagon, exchanging fire with Harlan and the remaining raider, but he was pinned down, outnumbered. The church door slammed open below her. Footsteps on the stairs. The wounded raider. Coming for her. Martha turned from the window, rifle ready. When he appeared, bloodied and snarling, she didn't hesitate. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. He tumbled back down the stairs. More gunfire outside. She returned to the window to see townspeople advancing. Emboldened by Jake's stand, Harlan was retreating toward the livery stable, still firing. His last man fell to a shot from Mayor Garrett. But Harlan had reached cover, and horses. He'd escape unless... Martha saw Jake break from cover. Pursuing... "No!" she screamed, but he couldn't hear over the gunfire. The two men faced each other in the dusty street, the rising sun casting long shadows. Martha held her breath as they circled, predators sizing up the kill. "Just you and me now. Cooper," Harlan called, the way it should have ended years ago. "Yes." No more words. Hands hovered over guns. The street held its breath. They drew. Thunder rolled across Cedar Ridge. Martha saw Jake stagger. Hand pressed to his side, but Harlan was down, unmoving in the dust. Jake stood for a moment longer. Then his knees buckled. "Jake!" Martha flew down the stairs, past the body of the raider, out into the street. She reached him as he fell, catching him, cradling his head in her lap. Blood seeped between his fingers. Too much blood. "Got him," Jake whispered. "You're safe now. Don't you dare die on me." Martha pressed her hand over his, trying to stem the flow. "You hear me, Jake Cooper? You promised we'd have time. You promised." "Martha." His hand found her face, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Worth it. You're worth everything." "Help!" she screamed. "Someone get the doctor!" People surrounded them now, the same townspeople who'd cast her out, but she saw something new in their faces. Respect, gratitude. They'd witnessed courage, sacrifice, love strong enough to stand against violence. Tom Coulson pushed through. "Doc's hurt bad, but Mrs. Barker's got medical training. She's coming." Jake's breathing was shallow, his skin pale beneath the tan, but his eyes stayed on Martha's face, drinking her in like a man seeing water after days in the desert. "If I don't, you will," Martha interrupted fiercely. "You'll survive this. We'll build that life we talked about. Maybe not here, but somewhere. Together." "Together," he repeated, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I like the sound of that." Mrs. Barker arrived, immediately taking charge. "Get him inside, carefully." "Martha, keep pressure on that wound." As they carried Jake toward the doctor's office, Martha heard Reverend Mills speaking to the crowd. "We've seen evil today, but we've also seen good triumph. These two stood for our town when they had every reason to turn away. Perhaps it's time we remembered what Christian charity truly means." Martha barely heard him. All her focus was on Jake, his fading consciousness, his blood on her hands, his life hanging by a thread. But he was alive. They both were, and whatever judgment the town might pass, whatever future awaited them, they'd face the devil together and won. That had to count for something. In this life or the next. That had to be enough. The fever broke on the 4th day. Martha had barely left Jake's bedside, watching each labored breath, cooling his burning skin with damp cloths, whispering prayers and promises into the darkness. Mrs. Barker had done what she could, extracted the bullet, cleaned the wound, stitched torn flesh. The rest was up to Jake's will to live and God's mercy. When his eyes finally opened, clear and focused, Martha's sob of relief brought Mrs. Barker running. "Well now," the older woman said, checking his pulse. "Looks like you're too stubborn to die. Mr. Cooper, good thing, too. This woman here would have marched into heaven itself to drag you back." Jake's hand found Martha's, his grip weak but real. "How long?" 4 days, Martha whispered. 4 very long days. Harlan? Dead. His men too. The town safe. She squeezed his fingers. "You saved us all." "No." His voice was rough but certain. "We saved each other?" Over the following days, as Jake slowly healed, Cedar Ridge underwent its own transformation. The violence had shaken something loose in the rigid social structure. Martha found herself welcomed in places that had shunned her, not with enthusiasm, perhaps, but with genuine respect. Elmira Morrison was the first to approach. standing stiffly in the doorway of the sick room. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words clearly difficult. "And a debt. You and Mr. Cooper risked your lives for people who had cast you out. That's true Christian virtue." Martha studied the older woman's pinched face, seeing the struggle there. "We didn't do it for approval, Mrs. Morrison." "No, that's what makes it meaningful." Elmira twisted her hands. "The church board has reconsidered. Your house is yours if you want it, your position in the community as well. And Jake?" A pause. "Mr. Cooper has proved himself. Whatever his past, his present actions speak louder. He'd be welcome to stay." After she left, Jake struggled to sit up, wincing at the movement. "Did I hear right? The town wants to adopt us?" "Seems so." Martha helped him adjust the pillows. "How do you feel about that?" "How do you feel? This is your home. Was my home, now?" She traced the line of his jaw, still marveling that he was alive to touch. "Now home is wherever you are. Here, California, Mexico. I don't care as long as we're together." Jake caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. "A man could search his whole life and not find a woman like you. Good thing you stopped searching in Cedar Ridge, then. The best thing—" His expression grew serious. "But Martha, the offer to stay, maybe we should consider it. I'm tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder. If the town's willing to accept us, you'd want to stay? Truly. I want to build something instead of always tearing down. Want to wake up in the same bed, work the same land, maybe hear the laughter of children someday." He looked almost shy. "If that's something you'd want too." Martha's heart swelled. "Children? Well, we'd need to make it official first. Can't have the preacher's widow living in sin indefinitely." His thumb rubbed over her ringless finger. "What do you say, Martha Whitfield? Will you marry a reformed outlaw?" "I thought you'd never ask." She leaned down to kiss him, careful of his wounds. "Yes, Jake Cooper. Yes to all of it." They were married 2 weeks later, when Jake could stand at the altar without swaying. Reverend Mills performed the ceremony in the little church where Martha had first been wed. But this time, she spoke her vows with joy rather than duty, promised herself to a man she'd chosen rather than accepted. The town turned out in force, not from obligation but from genuine celebration. Even Mayor Garrett, still nursing his wounded shoulder, stood as witness. The woman who'd been cast out as fallen was now embraced as a hero's bride. But it was the quiet moments Martha treasured most. Jake's wonder when she placed his hand on her still flat belly 3 months later. The way he'd stop whatever he was doing just to watch her hang washing, as if he still couldn't believe she was real. The nights when bad dreams woke him, and she'd hold him until the ghosts retreated. They bought a small ranch outside town with money the grateful citizens collected. Nothing grand, just enough land for horses and hope. Jake proved to have a gift with animals, gentling the wildest colts with patience instead of force. Martha kept the books, tended the garden, made their house a home. One evening, as purple twilight painted the desert, they sat on their porch watching the horses graze. Jake's arm was around her head on his shoulder, simple comforts that still felt miraculous. "Any regrets?" he asked, as he did sometimes when the shadows grew long. "Only one," Martha admitted. He tensed. "What's that?" "That it took so long to find you. All those wasted years being who others expected instead of who I was meant to be." "Not wasted," Jake corrected gently. "Everything that came before led us here. The good and bad. Choices and consequences. Without them, we might have passed on the street and never known what we were missing." Martha turned to study his face, weathered still but softened by contentment. The dangerous edge remained, would always remain, but it no longer defined him. He was Jake Cooper, rancher, husband, soon-to-be father. The past existed but didn't own him. "You've gotten philosophical in your old age," she teased. "You've made me that way? Man starts thinking deep thoughts when he's got something to lose." "You won't lose me. We survived Harlan, the town's judgment, your past, my propriety. What's left to threaten us?" "Time," Jake said quietly. "Just ordinary time. days and years and the inevitable end we all face. Then we'd better make them count. She took his hand, placing it over the growing life within her. Every sunrise, every ordinary moment. No more hiding from life, no more just existing. We live fully and freely, for whatever time we're given. Together, always together. As if in agreement, the child within her moved, the first flutter of new life born from love that had conquered death. Jake's face transformed with wonder, and Martha knew that all the pain, all the struggle, all the dangerous choices had been worth this moment. The stars emerged overhead, distant and eternal, but Martha no longer felt small beneath them. She'd claimed her place in the vast universe, not as the preacher's widow or the town's moral symbol, but as herself, Martha Cooper, beloved wife, soon-to-be mother, woman who'd chosen love over safety and found both in the end. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The ranch needed work. The baby would arrive. Life would test them in new ways. Jake still woke some nights reaching for his gun. Martha still felt the weight of others' expectations, though she no longer bowed beneath them. But tonight, sitting on their porch with the man who'd taught her to live, Martha knew peace. Not the false peace of surrender, but the true peace of battles won and love claimed despite all odds. "I love you," she said, words that still felt like rebellion and freedom combined. "I love you too," Jake replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Thank you for saving me. We saved each other, remember?" "No, Martha, you saved me. From Harlan. From the town, from myself. You saw something worth redeeming and refused to let go. That kind of faith." He shook his head. "That kind of faith moves mountains. Or at least one stubborn drifter." They laughed together as night settled over their small ranch. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, coyotes called across the desert. Life in all its wild beauty surrounded them. No longer something to fear but to embrace. The preacher's widow was gone, buried with the woman who'd accepted half a life. In her place stood Martha Cooper, wife, mother-to-be, partner in all things. She'd hidden her desires until a drifter forced a kiss she couldn't deny. But that kiss had awakened more than desire. It had awakened life itself, and life, Martha had learned, was always worth the risk. The desert wind whispered through the sage, carrying the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a nighthawk called. Jake's arms tightened around her, and Martha closed her eyes, grateful beyond words for this moment, this man, this life she'd claimed against all odds. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight, they had everything. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Martha and Jake's journey in the comments. Your feedback helps bring more of these frontier love stories to life.